just seemed appropriate somehow, like I need an excuse. I'm getting hints of engine oil, cordite, exhaust fumes, lovely. So it's done, the little Spitfire's done, and it was good fun, I have to admit. I thoroughly enjoyed that one, and it was all done within the space of this thing, the Mustang for the magazine. I haven't progressed an awful lot in this one. The canopy didn't fit, which was a bit of a bummer, so I decided to cut the canopy into, I've actually made the quarter lights, I've made it of acetate, I don't know if you'll be able to see that. And the canopy on the P51C is hinged rather than sliding, so I've decided to try and vac form the three pieces that would make up the middle section, which isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be honest. Having vac formed my own canopies before, I thought a nice sized piece like this and a nice flat piece, there's no strange curves or angular curves, it's just, you know, nice and simple. I mean, the vac forming process is okay, it's just the optical quality is a bit rough, kind of rippled, and the slightest little bit of dust shows up on these ones. So there's a chap in our club who makes these exquisitely beautiful vac formers, so I'm waiting on one of them, and it's just that I think that it'll be able to handle a bigger piece than the one I made, which was made specifically for doing 1/44 scale canopies anyway, because I don't think mine's got enough suck, as it were. Anyway, oh, and also you could probably see here I've made a start, well obviously made a start, made it fairly well on, with the big Thunderbolt for the magazine, the Italeri P47D. Building it more or less out of box. I did buy an Eduard zoom set to kind of enhance the cockpit, although apart from the harnesses and the instrument panel you can't really see any of the other enhancements. I've done a wee bit of cabling here and there just to make it look a little bit fussier when you look in there, but other than that it'll be out of box. Just waiting on some filler on the wind roots to dry. That's one thing I hate about Thunderbolt models, is the wheel wells are often part of the wing and part of the fuselage, and they have this little wavy design in the metal, so that when you put them together, the wings to the fuselage, you often get a gap that needs to be filled or dealt with. I mean, even the best fitting wing to fuselage joint is still going to show some kind of division, which is a pity, but anyway. So the little Spitfire's done, and yes, I am actually very happy with it. Not 100%, because there are one or two little things that I'm obviously not happy with, and that would be the canopy and the landing flaps. Now the canopy was made by Brengun. It was a little vac form set where you got the two canopies, one that was closed, so it was a one piece overall, and then the other one which was in the three separate parts. And the problem is that the sliding section isn't nesting as well as I'd have hoped over the fixed section, in that it's causing it to sort of bow out a wee bit. And it's just because of the thickness. I mean, down at 1/44 scale, when you think about it, I mean 1mm in 1/44 scale is what, 144 millimeters up here in the real world, so that's what 1mm at 1/44 scale represents. So, you know, it's just one of those limitations with 1/44 scale parts, if you're going to be doing detailing, that is. And I did consider vac forming my own using the Eduard injection canopy, because it's a beautiful, crisp, cleanly moulded, beautiful frame lines, so they would be quite vividly represented if I was to vac form over that. And of course the reason I would be doing that is that the resultant vac form is that little bit bigger than the original, so it might nest a little bit better over the rear section. The thing is, because of that fact that 1mm goes a long way, it might look too bulbous, because it is just that, whatever the thickness of the extruded clear is going to be. Well, the heck, I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess of what that thickness would be, but it just might be enough to make it look a bit silly. But and the thing is, you can only really see this if you look from the starboard side at a funny angle going up, because you can actually then see that the frame isn't locked into that little sort of track that it would roll into. But it might be a bit of a minor gripe. But anyway, the other one would be the landing flaps, which I made completely scratch built, and it's just one of those things with detailing at 1/44th scale. Again, going back to this, getting the measurements right. I mean, for example, the engine is actually the second incarnation of the engine, and the first one was just too small. And actually, in actual fact, that was the same with the Stuka. I got the first engine too small as well, and then by the time you come to do the second, it might actually be an idea, if you ever do scratch building at 1/44 scale, is to build two. Whatever it is you're doing, build two, because the second one you always get so much better than the first, just because you've figured out what you really need to do. And the second one I was really quite happy with, because it did look like a Merlin engine. 6 divisions on each bank of cylinders. I even managed to get 12 ignition leads in there. That was again another trial and error thing. Originally I'd put a little bit of styrene with 12 pieces of stretch sprue coming off of that to represent the ignition lead, and trying to bend them, and again going back to what I was saying about the limitations of scratch building at that scale. Sometimes the parts are so small that to get the appropriate amount of glue on them either means too much glue or you don't have enough glue, in which case when you start to try and move them, in the case of the ignition leads, they would just break off. It's like a drop of water. A water drop is an actual calibrated amount. It's as the water sort of builds into the drop and it starts to, gravity starts to pull it down, it reaches a point where its mass exceeds its ability to, the surface tension, and it falls and it becomes a drop. And it's kind of similar with glue. So when you plop the part into the glue, it sucks up all this stuff that then sits like a big bulbous mass on the end, and sometimes it's almost the same size as the part. If not, the other problem you have is the surface tension between the part and the tweezer is often greater than the bond between the part and the model. But anyway, so as I was saying, I ended up drilling 6 holes using a 0.3mm drill in the top of the engine, where I would plonk in 2 appropriately scaled pieces of copper wire, which I'd annealed first to make it a little bit, you run it through a candle flame, and it just creates this, it makes it sort of softer, as it were, which is what they call annealing. So I was able to drop 2 pieces in each, so in 6 holes, 2 pieces in each, there's your 12 ignition leads, and I was able to then, because that gave them a good anchor point inside the little holes filled with glue, and I was able to then form them exactly the way I wanted to, and then I just simply glued a bit of styrene rod over the top of that to represent the manifold. The weird thing is, I've actually made a better job of that ignition lead manifold setup on this one at 1/44 scale than I did on the 1/32 scale one, which is actually what I used as my reference. There's plenty of pictures of Merlins online, but to actually have a 1/32 scale Merlin in front of me on the bench was a perfect guide. So yeah, I was very happy with the engine. I mean, the firewall detail, again, there's only so much you can do at this scale. I have managed to sort of replicate most of or give the impression of most of the whatever these components are that are on the firewall. And once painted and weathered, it kind of sort of, you look at it and you know it's a Spitfire, basically, at the end of the day. But yeah, the landing flaps were a bit of a, they caused 1 or 2 little problems. I mean, the ones that are on the plane are actually the 3rd version that I built. I had to scrap 2, and the rib detail has been scraped off and reapplied, I think, 3 times as well. So, and the main problem was the fitting of them. I think that was 6 times it took me to actually get them. So, put them on, oh, it's not the right angle, break them off, put them back on. Because again, it's brass to plastic, so I'd be using the super glue, so there's no physical bond taking place, it's just being adhered to the surface. But the more I would take it off, there'd be a little bit of glue left there, and then I would use that sort of, when that broke away, it would leave an impression, so I was actually able to use that as the sort of the guide for the next one. But the reason I've kind of got them quite, the angle is a little bit steeper than it probably should be on the flaps, but that's because it's a bit of a mess in there in places. So 1/44 scale, so, you know. But yeah, what else did I do to it that was quite a challenge? Oh, the antenna wires that go, I'll just use the Thunderbolt as an example, even though I don't have the horizontal stabilizers on. On the Spitfire, it doesn't go from the antenna mast to the top of the vertical stabilizer. It goes from the sides of the fuselage up to the sort of outer points of the horizontal stabilizers. And at first I tried stretch sprue, and that was way too thick. It just looked like telegraph poles, basically. So then I thought, well, I've heard of this done before when people are rigging very, very small ships. So I went out and plucked a hair from the wife's head and tried that. But again, it was too thick, and it was also blonde, which meant that I would have had to paint it, which would have A, added extra thickness, and B, would have meant I'd have been putting pressure on it as I was running the brush along. Because again, same problem. If you could imagine trying to glue a strand of human hair or hair to a surface, the amount of glue that's actually going to be on there. Because here's one weird thing, that when you dip it in the glue doesn't accumulate around the very, very tip. It runs in slightly. So you've actually got a little bit of, you know, be it styrene rod or whatever, that's glueless. So you have to kind of bring it down, put it at an angle so that the glue then runs down into the joint, and then lift it back out again. But as I say, the wife's hair was too thick, so it was actually the dog that came to the rescue, because Max has these black patches on him. You yoinked a few hairs off the back of the dog, and as it turned out, they looked about the right thickness. They were also the right colour, which means I didn't have to paint them. But again, being even thinner, it was a bit of... I actually nearly screwed the whole thing up on the starboard side, where it's coming out of basically the decal. Where I pulled too much as I was trying to get the tension. I pulled it too much and it popped off, and it took some of the decal with it, but I was able to touch that up okay, so I think we got away with it. Oh, the decals turned out alright, by the way. Remember I was saying we had the yellow disc, followed by the blue disc, followed by the red disc, so it was actually 3 decals, and I did actually have a bit of a problem with the colour density, because it was going over black and white, and you did see the black and white through them. Even though it was just this tiny, tiny, tiny little bit in the middle, it was enough that your eye did go to it. So as it turns out, the decal on the port side, where it has to be cut for the radio compartment, is actually 4 decals deep. But we got away with it, so that was good. They were nice and thin. So, but there we go. Spitfire's done. I'll have to get working back on these guys again, get some progress for the magazine. But I tell you, now that I've got the taste for it, I've got these. I bought these actually last year at the Glasgow show. Sweet kits, in fact, it was when I bought the Wildcat as well. So I've got a 0 and a 109F4. I also got Bren Gun photo etch cockpits for both of these. So I'm going to do the same with these. The Wildcat's cowling and propeller and engine aren't glued on. They were such a good fit that they're just pushed on. So it might be an idea to have like a Spitfire, the Wildcat, the 109 and a 0 all sitting in line, all with their engines showing and stuff and various details showing. The photo etch set for this one also includes the centre section of the canopy. So I'll be able to show that open as well. In the case of the 0, I don't know what I'm going to do with that one in order to show the cockpit. I don't think there's a vac form canopy for this yet, although I suppose I could try myself. Yeah, I think I'm going to have a go at the these are 1/44 scale. These are Sweet, by the way, not Eduard. So yeah, these are kind of on the list of things to do fairly soon. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed the little Spitfire, and I'm going to wait to enjoy my Spitfire. Toodaloo.